Now, the UK's negotiations with Brussels for exiting the European Union have barely begun, but British Prime Minister Theresa May has now kicked off another thorny process, replacing European laws with homemade ones. Now, the European Union withdrawal bill, if enacted, would ensure that the EU cannot enforce any new regulations once the UK leaves. It'll convert EU rules into British law after Brexit. The UK Parliament could then amend or even scrap those laws. Thousands of regulations could be affected, including workers' rights, environmental standards, consumer protection and immigration. Now, opposition parties have said they will fight the government, which has only a slim majority in Parliament, at every turn, and that means a whole load of uncertainty for investors. So far, that hasn't affected the value of the British pound. Sterling appreciated against the dollar, investors being more focused on the prospects of an interest rate hike by the Bank of England. Now, meanwhile, the issue of how much the UK will have to pay the EU before it leaves is also becoming more fractious. Let's listen to what the UK's Foreign Secretary and the chief EU negotiator have been saying recently.
The sums that I have seen that they propose to demand from this country seem to me to be extortionate, and I think to go whistle is an entirely appropriate expression.
I'm not hearing any whistling, just the clock ticking. The EU positions are clear. We now need to know the UK's position on each of these issues in order to make progress. My aim is to make good progress next week and at our next sessions in August on all issues. We cannot remain idle as the clock is ticking.
But it hasn't been all bad news for poor Mrs May. At least Spain's royal family say their country wants to invest more money in the UK. Spain's King Felipe is on a 3-day visit to the UK, and the British government says Spanish companies have committed millions of dollars to the UK economy to coincide with the trip. One such investment includes a $39 million commitment by Spanish manufacturer CAF to build trains and trams in Wales, creating 300 jobs.
We cannot deny that this scenario originated by the UK's decision to leave the EU has generated uncertainty and doubts for our companies, businesses, and especially small and medium-sized enterprises. We must make sure that the current negotiations reduce this uncertainty to a minimum. It is extremely important that the future framework of our relations establishes the conditions for a close economic relationship, trying to minimize future obstacles and barriers.
Meanwhile, our own highly distinguished editor-at-large Craig Copetas is on a reciprocal trip to Spain. He joins us now from Majorca. Hello, Craig, looking very distinguished and rather relaxed, I have to say, over there in Majorca. Let's start in Spain, where you are. Spain might be looking to invest more in the UK, but even before Brexit, it's already getting hard for a lot of the British expatriates who live in Spain, isn't it?
Well, yes. There is a human cost of the bureaucratic bickering, and we've spent the day going up and down the coast talking to many British residents here. Two numbers. There are approximately an estimated 309,000 British citizens living in Spain. Anywhere from 4,500 to 5,000 of them live here in Majorca. And if you wanted to define their headspace right now, based on what we heard today, the words are disaster, desperation, despair, and dysfunction. The reason for this, they cite 3 major issues. The British expat community is worried that they're not going to be entitled to health care after Brexit. Right now, under the NHS, they can go in here, they can get health care. They're worried that their local bank accounts will be subject to supplemental taxes, even though they already pay taxes in the UK. And the third concern they have is what unfettered rights will EU citizens have to remain in the UK, because if the May government puts shackles on them, the fear here is they're going to get the blowback and it's going to hurt them.
Let's stay in Spain and some of those British expatriates who are there. A lot of them have set up businesses over the years. They've been there for decades. What contingency plans are they putting in place?
Well, the most interesting one I heard about today had to do with animation studios. The Spanish, I'm told by experts in this industry, produce terrific animators, and they all, or many of them, come to London to work. Now, what we're seeing the major animation studios doing right now is they're in the process of opening satellite studios in Spain and elsewhere in the EU, so they don't have to worry about whether it's a hard Brexit or a soft Brexit. You are seeing, again, this is not scientific, just what we've heard today, an increasing number of stores, boutique shops owned by British here are closing down. Restaurants, they just don't want to face this potential hurricane that's coming. Again, despair, desperation, disaster, dysfunction. That is how the British community here in Majorca is looking at the discussion taking place now between Brussels and London. They feel they're being left out of the mix.
Now, the other thing, of course, that we reported at the top of the show is this repeal bill that is going to be discussed in Parliament in the coming months. How are people in Europe looking at the prospect of European laws being repealed in the UK, especially those people who do business with the UK from the continent?
You know, I don't think we can put too fine a point on this, Azar. Europeans don't really have Brexit on their radar screen. It's just not an issue here. It is a huge issue in the UK. It is a gigantic issue if you're one of the 309,000 British citizens who lives in Spain. But if you're carrying an EU passport, right now, all of the discussion over Brexit is something that they don't really care about. It's Britain's problem. It's not their problem. Whether they're whistling past the graveyard on this, I can't say, but that's the headspace here right now.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting going forwards, especially in places like Spain with very large British contingencies. What is the prospect then that these people may... what is the prospect of them having to come back to the UK? What are they saying to you that that is a possibility at the moment? How do they respond to that?
Their response is the hope that the British government is going to give EU citizens unfettered and permanent access to living in the UK so that they are not facing the backdraft of the UK not allowing EU citizens to remain in the UK. The other problem here that they say, though, when you talk about that, many of these people have families here, Azar. So we're not looking in 10 or 20-year tranches, but a permanence to this ebb and flow of Europeans being able to live in the UK and UK residents being able to remain within the EU. Here in Majorca, these British residents, some of them, have millions upon millions of euros and pounds and dollars invested in the communities down here and in real estate.
Interesting that we have to leave it there on that point of people who are invested so heavily in the region. Let's get the view now from one of those people who are invested. Let's go to Jameel Ahmad, who is the Vice President of Market Research at Forex trading company FXTM. He joins us now from Limassol in Cyprus. Thank you very much for being on Money Talks, Jameel. Tell us a little bit about how people in your industry, in the forex trading industry, are looking at this repeal bill. It is another layer of uncertainty in the whole Brexit process, is it not?
Thank you very much for having me, firstly. It's a pleasure. Now, looking at this repeal bill, actually what we're seeing in the market is quite a muted reaction. And one thing that I've noticed now since the night of the UK election just 1 month ago is that the financial markets themselves are becoming quite desensitized to Brexit issues, and they're not really moving so much to the Brexit and UK economic problems or the political problems on this side. It appears themselves are treating Brexit and UK political issues as independent problems for the UK itself. Like I say, the markets haven't moved too much to this repeal bill this week, and that's something you wouldn't have expected previously.
Great. I'm going to have to leave it there with you for now, Jameel. We are running out of time. Thank you so much for being on Money Talk. Jameel Ahmad, FXTM there.